It was a beautiful October morning in 2018, the kind of day that seemed perfect for a celebration. In Amsterdam, New York, a group of friends and family members were eagerly preparing for a special occasion. Today was Amy Steenberg's birthday, and her husband Axel had planned something extraordinary. Amy was turning 30, and to mark the milestone, Axel had organized a surprise party. He rented a luxurious stretch limousine to take Amy and 16 of their closest friends and family on a tour of the nearby breweries. It was going to be a day filled with laughter, joy, and memories. The group gathered at Axel's house, their excitement bubbling over as they piled into the limousine. They took selfies, shared jokes, and settled in for what promised to be an unforgettable day. The driver, Scott Lissinikia, greeted them warmly and assured them they were in for a smooth ride. The journey began without a hitch. The limo glided through the picturesque landscape, the friends inside unaware of the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. They made their first stop at Ommegang Brewery, where they sampled beers and shared stories, their laughter ringing out across the sunny courtyard. After a few hours, they climbed back into the limousine, their spirits high. They were heading to another brewery, ready to continue the celebration. But as they drove through the rural roads of Shahari, something unexpected happened. Scott, the driver, noticed something was off. The brakes felt spongy, unresponsive. He tried to reassure himself it was nothing, but the feeling of dread grew stronger with each passing mile. Unbeknownst to the passengers, the limousine they were riding in had a dark history. A month earlier, the limousine had failed a safety inspection. It had multiple mechanical issues, including faulty brakes. But Prestige Limousine, the company that owned the vehicle, ignored the warnings and continued to rent it out. As the limo approached the junction of State Routes 30 and 30A, Scott tried to slow down, but the brakes didn't respond. The limo barreled through the stop sign out of control. In a split second, the joyous day turned into a nightmare. The limo veered off the road, slammed into a ditch, and then crashed into a parked SUV. The impact was so violent that it killed all 17 passengers, the driver, and 2 pedestrians who were in a nearby parking lot. The scene was one of utter devastation. First responders rushed to the site, but it was too late. The lives of 20 people were lost in an instant. Families were shattered, and a community was left in mourning. The investigation that followed uncovered a series of failures and neglect. Prestige Limousine had ignored safety regulations, and the owner, Shahed Hussain, was charged with criminally negligent homicide. The case sparked outrage and highlighted the need for stricter regulations in the limousine industry. Today, a memorial stands at the crash site, a solemn tribute to the lives lost. The tragedy of Shahari is a stark reminder of the importance of safety and the devastating consequences of neglect.
On January 18, 2023, 21-year-old Rosa Chacon was preparing for a night out in Chicago. She told her family she was going to meet someone, though she didn't specify who. That night, she got into a rideshare vehicle, and it was the last time her family saw her. Days passed with no word from Rosa. Her family, frantic with worry, reported her missing and began a relentless search. They plastered the city with flyers, contacted the police, and even hired a private investigator. Despite their efforts, there was no trace of Rosa. Her phone was off, and her social media accounts had gone silent. The city seemed to swallow her whole, leaving her family in a state of despair and confusion. Weeks turned into months with no leads. The Chacon family's hope began to wane, but they never stopped looking for Rosa. The community rallied around them, but each passing day without news deepened the mystery and their anguish. Then, on March 9, 2023, a shocking discovery was made in a neighboring town of Chicago. A laundry cart abandoned in a deserted alleyway contained a horrific secret. Inside, wrapped in a sheet, were human remains. The authorities were called immediately, and the area was cordoned off. Forensic investigators worked quickly to identify the body. It wasn't long before they confirmed the worst. The remains were those of Rosa Chacon. The news devastated her family and community, who had held out hope for her safe return. The investigation into Rosa's death took on a new urgency. How had she ended up in a laundry cart, abandoned in an alley miles from where she was last seen? Detectives pieced together clues, starting with her last known location and the rideshare vehicle she had entered. They interviewed the driver and combed through surveillance footage, but the answers remained elusive. One chilling detail emerged. Rosa's body showed signs of having been held captive before her death. The nature of her injuries suggested she had suffered immensely. This revelation deepened the horror of her family's loss and intensified the search for her killer. The community was left reeling from the brutality of the crime. Candlelight vigils were held in Rosa's memory, and calls for justice grew louder. The Chacon family, though devastated, vowed to continue fighting until those responsible for Rosa's death were brought to justice. To this day, the mystery of what exactly happened to Rosa Chacon continues to haunt those who knew and loved her. Her tragic end serves as a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk in the shadows and the importance of never giving up on finding the truth, no matter how long it takes. On the evening of August 22, 2020, 40-year-old Joseph Edward Mejica seemed to vanish into thin air. That night, in the bustling city of Oakland, California, he was last seen by his mother, who was the final person to lay eyes on him. Joseph, who was homeless at the time, was known to frequent unsheltered encampments, and when he didn't show up for days, his worried mother reported him missing. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but there was no sign of Joseph. His family, desperate for any news, offered a $5,000 reward for information that could lead to finding him. But despite their best efforts, the case went cold. It was as if Joseph had simply disappeared off the face of the earth. Fast forward to March 9, 2022. The Henry J. Kaiser Convention Center, a once grand building that had been closed since 2005, was undergoing renovations. As a construction worker was tearing out a wall inside the building, he made a grim discovery. Tucked away in a cavity space within the wall were human remains. Authorities were called to the scene, but identifying the remains was no easy task. There were no immediate clues, and the body had been there for a long time. It wasn't until forensic investigators discovered a tubular implant in the leg that they got their break. The implant had a serial number, which they traced back to Highland Hospital. Nearly 2 decades earlier, Joseph Mejica had undergone surgery there, and the implant was his. Joseph's mother provided a heartbreaking piece of the puzzle. She explained that her son often tried to steal copper wiring from construction sites to make some money. Authorities believe that on that fateful night in 2020, Joseph might have been attempting to do just that at the convention center. They theorize that he fell from the roof, and over time his body slipped further down into the cavity space inside the wall. What began as a mysterious disappearance ended in a tragic discovery. Joseph Edward Mejica, a man who had slipped through society's cracks, was found in the walls of an abandoned building, a silent witness to the perils of desperation. His death, though accidental, served as a stark reminder of the unseen struggles faced by those living in this world today.
In the quiet suburbs of Santa Coloma de Gramenet, just outside of Barcelona, Spain, there stands a peculiar landmark, a giant papier-mâché dinosaur. For years, this dinosaur was a local curiosity, a relic from a bygone era of children's amusement. But in May 2021, it became the center of a chilling and baffling mystery. It all began on a sunny afternoon when a father and his young son were playing near the dinosaur. As the boy chased his ball around the base of the dinosaur, something caught his eye. Deep within the creature's hollow leg, he saw what appeared to be a pair of shoes. Curious and a bit frightened, he ran to tell his father. The father approached cautiously, peering into the small opening. What he saw sent shivers down his spine. Inside the dinosaur was the body of a man, wedged tightly in the narrow space. The father immediately called the authorities, and within minutes, police and firefighters arrived at the scene. It took hours of careful work to dismantle the dinosaur's leg and retrieve the body. The man was identified as a 39-year-old who had been reported missing just days earlier. But the question remained: how did he end up inside the dinosaur? The police investigation revealed a series of strange and tragic events. It turned out that the man had been searching for his lost mobile phone. In a desperate attempt to retrieve it, he had climbed into the dinosaur, thinking he could reach it. But the narrow space proved to be a trap. He became stuck and, unable to free himself, died of positional asphyxia. The discovery shocked the local community and left many people unsettled. How could such an ordinary and seemingly safe structure turn into a death trap? The dinosaur, once a symbol of childhood joy, now stood as a grim reminder of how quickly a situation can turn from mundane to fatal. In the aftermath, the dinosaur was removed and the site was cleared. The memory of the tragic incident, however, lingers on. It's a stark reminder to always be cautious, even in the most unexpected places, and to never underestimate the potential dangers that lurk in the most innocuous of spots. And so, the story of the papier-mâché dinosaur outside of Barcelona remains one of the strangest and saddest tales in recent memory. A bizarre twist of fate that turned a local attraction into the scene of a mysterious and tragic death.
Imagine you're getting ready for work. It's a normal day, nothing out of the ordinary. You step out of your small home, perhaps after saying goodbye to your family, and you head to your job at a large garment factory. You clock in, start your shift, and everything seems fine. But what if I told you that in a matter of hours, the building you're standing in, a place you've gone to every day, is about to become the site of one of the deadliest industrial disasters in modern history? This is the story of the Rana Plaza collapse, Dhaka, Bangladesh, April 24, 2013. Rana Plaza was an 8-story commercial building in the busy suburb of Savar on the outskirts of Dhaka. On any given day, this building housed over 5,000 workers, men and women who spent their days sewing clothes for some of the world's biggest fashion brands. But Rana Plaza wasn't just a factory, it was a time bomb. You see, the building was never meant to hold the weight of the equipment and the people inside it. It had originally been designed as a small commercial building, intended for shops and offices. But greed got in the way. The building's owner, Sohail Rana, decided to add more floors, ignoring the fact that the structure simply couldn't support the additional weight. Even worse, those extra floors were filled with heavy industrial equipment, generators, sewing machines, and thousands of workers. The morning of April 23, 2013, should have been a wake-up call. Deep cracks had appeared in the walls and pillars of the building, so deep that the local media caught wind of it. The cracks were so obvious, so concerning, that the shops and a bank on the lower floors immediately closed. But Rana, he insisted the building was safe and forced his garment workers to return the next day. His exact words: "It's nothing. The building is safe. Get back to work." April 24th began like any other day, but it would end in horror. Around 8:45 a.m., just after the workday had begun, the power went out. The generators kicked in, and that's when it happened. The building shuddered and began to collapse. In a matter of seconds, the entire 8-story structure crumbled like a house of cards, trapping thousands of workers under tons of concrete and steel. Survivors described the moments of the collapse as a nightmare. Screams, darkness, dust so thick it choked them. Many were buried alive, unable to move, breathe, or even scream for help. The noise was deafening, a mix of machinery, crumbling concrete, and the agonizing cries of those trapped. Rescue efforts began immediately, but they were chaotic. Local volunteers, firefighters and soldiers worked tirelessly, pulling people from the wreckage with their bare hands. But the sheer scale of the collapse was overwhelming. Days passed and the bodies kept coming. For 17 days, rescuers searched through the rubble. In the end, over 1,100 people lost their lives, and more than 2,500 were injured, many permanently disabled. But the story doesn't end there. The Rana Plaza collapse wasn't just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. The incident exposed the brutal reality of the fast fashion industry, a world where profits often come before people's lives. It forced global brands to take a hard look at their supply chains and led to significant changes in safety regulations for factories in Bangladesh. Sohail Rana, the man behind it all, was eventually arrested, and in 2017 he was sentenced to jail for corruption. But for the families of those who died, justice was far too late. The Rana Plaza disaster remains a haunting reminder of the cost of human greed and the lives lost in its wake. As you go about your day, wearing the clothes that keep you warm, keep in mind the sacrifices made by those far away, in places you may never see, but whose lives were forever changed by choices beyond their control. And now, the next time you hear the name Rana Plaza, it won't just be another news story, it will be a story of unimaginable loss and the desperate need for change. If you were walking through the busy streets of Morbi, a historic city in India, on the evening of October 30th, 2022, you might have noticed a seemingly ordinary scene, a crowd of people casually strolling across a suspension bridge that had spanned the Machu River for more than 140 years. What you wouldn't know, though, is that just moments later, this ordinary scene would turn into a nightmare, leaving over 135 people dead and the entire nation in shock. But before we get to the terrifying moments that would unfold on that fateful day, we need to go back and understand how a piece of history, once a symbol of pride, could become the epicenter of tragedy. The history of the bridge. The Morbi Bridge, also known as the Julta Pool, was a colonial-era structure built during British rule in 1880. This 230-metre-long suspension bridge was an engineering marvel of its time, swaying gently as it carried people across the river for more than a century. Over the decades, the bridge became not just a vital connection between parts of the city, but a cultural landmark, a symbol of Morbi's rich heritage. By the time 2022 rolled around, however, this symbol of heritage was in dire need of repair. The bridge had been closed for maintenance earlier that year, and just days before the tragedy, it was reopened to the public by a private company after some renovation work. Or at least, that's what everyone was led to believe. The incident. On the evening of October 30th, the sun was setting and the bridge was packed. It was the day after the Diwali festival, and families, tourists and local residents flocked to the site, enjoying the festivities, taking photos and basking in the serene beauty of the river below. What none of them realized was that the bridge had been reopened without proper safety certification. Worse yet, the renovations were superficial, focusing more on aesthetics than structural integrity. Around 6:30 p.m., as the crowd on the bridge grew, people began to notice the structure swaying more than usual. What started as a gentle movement quickly turned into violent shaking. Then, without any warning, the cables supporting the bridge snapped. The entire structure collapsed in an instant, plunging hundreds of unsuspecting people into the murky waters below. In the chaos that followed, some managed to swim to the shore, while others clung desperately to the remnants of the bridge, screaming for help. The Machu River, normally calm and serene, had turned into a deadly trap. Rescue efforts were launched immediately, but with the darkness setting in and the river's current, many were lost in the waters before help could reach them. The aftermath. By the time dawn broke the next day, the full scale of the tragedy became apparent. Over 135 people had lost their lives, including women and children. It was one of the deadliest bridge collapses in recent history, and it raised serious questions. How could a bridge that had just undergone renovations fail so catastrophically? And who was responsible for allowing it to reopen without ensuring its safety? As investigations unfolded, a disturbing picture emerged. It turned out that the company responsible for the renovation had focused mainly on painting and cosmetic repairs, neglecting the crucial task of assessing the structural integrity of the bridge. Even more shocking was the fact that the bridge was reopened without a proper fitness certificate from the local authorities. This gross negligence not only led to the collapse, but also exposed the deeper issues of corruption and lack of oversight that plagued the system. Conclusion. The Morbi Bridge collapse was a tragic reminder of the consequences of cutting corners and putting profit over people's lives. It was a disaster that could have been avoided, a preventable tragedy that claimed the lives of over 135 innocent people. But perhaps the most chilling part of this story is the realization that, in the days leading up to the collapse, countless people walked across that bridge, unaware of the ticking time bomb beneath their feet. This tragedy left the people of Morbi, and indeed the entire nation of India, grappling with grief, anger, and a demand for accountability. And as for the Julta pool, what was once a symbol of heritage is now a haunting reminder of a dark day in India's history.
In January 2019, 5 teenage girls in Koszalin, Poland, were celebrating a birthday. They were excited for their adventure at an escape room, a popular activity where participants solve puzzles and riddles to escape a locked room. However, their thrilling evening took a turn for the worse in the most unimaginable way. The escape room was themed after a mysterious and enchanted world, meant to be challenging but fun. The girls entered the room, the door locked behind them, and the clock began ticking. As they started working on the first puzzle, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and excitement. Little did they know, a disaster was about to unfold. The building housing the escape room was old, and safety regulations were not strictly followed. A faulty gas cylinder used for heating was installed in the building. As the girls immersed themselves in solving the clues, a fire broke out in an adjoining room, quickly spreading through the building. The fire's smoke began to seep into the escape room. At first, the girls thought it was part of the game, a clever ploy to add suspense, but the smoke thickened and panic set in. They frantically searched for a way out, but the puzzles were designed to be difficult, and in their state of fear, they struggled to find the answers. On the outside, the building's staff and passers-by noticed the fire. Calls to emergency services were made, and firefighters arrived swiftly. However, the intensity of the flames made it difficult for them to reach the girls in time. The building's emergency exits were blocked or inadequately marked, and the room's lock mechanism was designed to be opened only upon solving the final puzzle. The 5 girls, all just 15 years of age, were trapped. The toxic fumes overwhelmed them long before rescuers could breach the door. The scene outside was chaotic, with parents and friends of the girls arriving, desperate for news. The firefighters fought bravely, but it was too late. All 5 girls lost their lives that night, a horrific end to what was meant to be a joyous celebration. A 25-year-old man, an employee of the escape room business, was also injured in the fire, who reportedly tried to help the girls escape their desperate situation. The tragedy sent shockwaves through Poland and the world, highlighting the grave consequences of neglecting safety regulations. The owner of the escape room, charged with intentionally creating a fire hazard, was sentenced to prison. The incident prompted a nationwide inspection of escape rooms, leading to the closure of many and the implementation of stricter safety standards. In the aftermath, memorials and vigils were held for the girls, and their families called for justice and reform. The incident serves as a somber reminder of the importance of safety and the terrible cost of oversight. The memory of those 5 young lives lost that night in Koszalin remains a poignant chapter in Poland's history, a story of joy turned to unimaginable tragedy in a matter of moments. In a moving memorial speech, Rev. Wojciech Paulak was quoted with the following: "In their friendship, they were and will remain together. They were together when their lives were ending. They are together here, and they will rest together in the cemetery, forever." My heart truly breaks for the families of the victims. Their lives ended much too soon and so tragically. May they all rest in peace.
On a chilly December night in 1991, the bustling city of Austin, Texas, would soon be gripped by a horrific tragedy that remains unsolved to this day. 4 vibrant young lives were cut short. 13-year-old Amy Ayers, 17-year-old Eliza Thomas, 17-year-old Jennifer Harbison, and her 15-year-old sister Sarah. These girls had bright futures ahead of them, but fate had a different plan. It was a typical Friday evening at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop. Jennifer and Eliza were working their shifts, while Sarah and her friend Amy waited for a ride home. Around 10 p.m., a man entered the shop looking to use the restroom. He spent an unusually long time there, raising no alarms at the moment. But what was he really up to? As closing time approached, a couple left the shop and noticed 2 men behaving suspiciously at a table. Little did anyone know, these men might have been planning something sinister. Jennifer locked the front door at 11 p.m., signaling the end of the day. But the nightmare was just beginning. By morning, the yogurt shop had transformed from a place of joy to a scene of unimaginable horror. The bodies of Amy, Eliza, Jennifer, and Sarah were discovered, brutally murdered. The city was in shock. Investigators worked tirelessly, piecing together evidence and following leads. But the case was complex, and answers remained elusive. Families were left devastated, seeking justice for their daughters. The community rallied, hoping for closure that never seemed to come. Decades have passed, and the yogurt shop murders remain a haunting mystery. Who were the men seen that night? What was their motive? And why have they never been caught? The families of Amy, Eliza, Jennifer, and Sarah deserve answers. The search for justice continues to this day. This is the story of the yogurt shop murders. A chilling reminder that even in a vibrant community, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface. My heart truly breaks for the loved ones of these young victims, whose lives were ripped from them far too soon. If you
On the remote North Sentinel Island, hidden away in the Indian Ocean, lies a tribe untouched by modern civilization. This is the story of a young missionary whose passion to spread his faith led to a tragic end. John Allen Chow was born on December 18, 1991, in Vancouver, Washington. From a young age, he was known for his adventurous spirit and deep Christian faith. Growing up, he was an Eagle Scout and a high school soccer player, always driven by a sense of purpose and a call to serve others. John's journey into mission work began during his college years at Oral Roberts University. He studied health and exercise science, but was captivated by stories of missionaries who had ventured into uncharted territories. He felt a profound calling to reach out to isolated tribes who had never heard of Christianity. North Sentinel Island is home to the Sentinelese, one of the last uncontacted tribes on Earth. The Indian government has long protected them, banning any contact to preserve their way of life and protect them from diseases they have no immunity against. Despite these restrictions, John felt an unwavering determination to share his faith with the Sentinelese. He meticulously planned his journey, learning about the tribe and preparing to navigate the island's dangers. In his journal, he wrote of his desire to bring the light of Jesus to the islanders. In November 2018, John made his way to the Andaman Islands. He bribed local fishermen to take him close to North Sentinel, fully aware of the risks he was taking. The fishermen dropped him off a few hundred meters from the shore, fearing the repercussions of going any closer. John's initial attempts to communicate with the Sentinelese were met with hostility. Undeterred, he returned the next day, singing worship songs and offering gifts. But the tribe's reaction grew more aggressive. On November 17, 2018, John made one final attempt. The fishermen, waiting at a distance, watched as he disappeared into the island's dense forest. Hours turned into a long, agonizing night. When dawn broke, they saw the islanders dragging John's body along the shore. The news of John Allen Chow's death sparked a global debate. Some saw him as a martyr, driven by faith and courage. Others criticized his actions, emphasizing the tribe's right to isolation and the reckless endangerment of their lives. His death highlighted the complex intersection of missionary work, indigenous rights, and the ethics of uncontacted tribes. John Allen Chow's story is a poignant reminder of the passion that drives individuals to extreme lengths in pursuit of their beliefs. It also serves as a solemn testament to the delicate balance between human connection and the preservation of ancient cultures. In the end, John Allen Chow's legacy is a blend of devotion and tragedy, a story that will be remembered and debated for years to come.
If you are interested in more true mysterious stories, optical illusions, and more, then please tap the like button, leave me a comment, and share this video. And as always, follow me for more interesting content like this and more. Thanks for watching. Stay curious.